So good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to wait about 10 more seconds, then we'll start the program. All right, well, my name is Kip Coddington. I'm the director of the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis at the School of Energy Resources here at the University of Wyoming. And I would like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Overview of a Possible New Federal Clean Electricity Standard, the View from Wyoming. The federal bill we're going to be talking about today is entitled the Clean Energy Innovation and Deployment Act, which is authored by U.S. Representative Diana DeGette. And she is chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee's Oversight and Investigations Subcommittee. And the reason why we're going to talk about this bill is it accommodates both carbon capture and storage and CCUS, as well as nuclear. Which of course are very important topics for us here in Wyoming. Before I have the privilege of introducing our distinguished panelists, I just want to set the stage with some background. So in terms of greenhouse gas controls on the existing coal fleet, the last several years have been quite interesting. So as we all know, the Obama administration implemented the Clean Power Plan, or endeavored to implement the Clean Power Plan. The Trump administration replaced the Clean Power Plan with the ACE rule, the Affordable Clean Energy Rule. And of course, neither ACE or the Clean Power Plan actually fully made it across the finish line. And it's unclear precisely what the Biden administration may do through EPA under the Clean Air Act towards those sources. But in that absence, of course, President Biden has announced his infrastructure package. And it is understood that part of that infrastructure could include a clean electricity standard, or CES. And a CES is certainly one of the proverbial hot topics in Washington, D.C. And of course, from a Wyoming perspective, this topic is of critical importance to us because of our leadership in technology such as carbon capture and storage and CCUS. Wyoming is a leader in CCUS law and policy, as we all know. We're home to the Wyoming Carbon Save Project up in Gillette. And most recently, the Wyoming legislature enacted House Bill 200 entitled Reliable and Dispatchable Low Carbon Energy Standards. And then even more recently than that, 2 weeks ago, we had the announcement from the Office of Governor Gordon about the SMR project. So it's interesting times in Wyoming on energy policy. But with that background, it's my distinct privilege to introduce our two panelists today. And our first panelist is Dr. NIkki Roy, who is the Climate Change and Environment Policy Director for U.S. Representative DeGette. Dr. Roy has more than 35 years of experience advising key lawmakers, top governmental officials, and corporate leaders on climate change, clean energy, and toxic chemical policy. And his work history includes previous stints working for Congress and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And from 2000 to 2014, Dr. Roy was the Vice President for Strategic Outreach at the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, C2ES, which we all know as well. Dr. Roy has a bachelor's in civil engineering from Stanford, a master's in environmental engineering from Stanford, and a PhD in public policy from Harvard. Our second panelist will be Jada Garofalo, who is a research scientist here at the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis. Jada attained her BS in Nutrition and Food Science from Colorado State University in 2010, and her MS in Climate Science and Policy from Bard College in 2014. Following graduate school, she worked as a climate policy fellow for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Fort Collins, Colorado. She also served as a co-author, steering committee member, and chapter coordinator for the Interagency National Climate and Health Assessment. She received her JD from the University of Wyoming in 2019 and was sworn into the bar that same year. She served as a student director of the Center for Law and Energy Resources in the Rockies, and she's argued before the United States 10th Circuit and is published in the peer review literature. Most recently, before coming to the University of Wyoming, she completed a judicial clerkship for the Honorable Herman Walker Jr. in the Superior Court of the 3rd Judicial District in Anchorage, Alaska. So with that background, I'm now going to turn the program over to you, Nikki. So Nikki, the ball is in your court.
Thanks so much, Kip, and for that really gracious introduction, and thanks for the University of Wyoming for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here with you today. I have to start by apologizing for these empty bookshelves. I've got, for the last year plus, I've been broadcasting from my home where I got a bunch of nice bookshelves, and usually I broadcast from my regular office where I got nice full bookshelves. But our office is, my office is all back in, and we're all very crowded and talking on Zoom calls together. So I had to find a quiet place, and this is it, and it's empty, and I apologize for that. So anyway, I'd like to talk to you about the Clean Energy Innovation and Deployment Act that Congresswoman DeGette has sponsored. She introduced it for the first time last July. We're preparing it for reintroduction now with some revisions. Why don't we go to the next slide, please? So the objective of this measure is to resolve the following three-part conundrum. First, Americans demand and deserve affordable, reliable electricity. And that's the way we are. We're not getting anything enacted unless we respect that it's important to the way we live. It's critically important to our economy. But second, according to all the best science, to avoid the worst consequences of global warming, we have to eliminate global greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as technologically feasible. But the problem is that, number three, we don't today have the technologies to generate affordable, reliable electricity with zero emissions. And this bill is trying to address that. Next slide, please. There are, as you'll see in a second, Clean Energy Standard is one component of a multi-layer build that Congresswoman DeGette has introduced to address that conundrum. Clean energy standards are sort of, they're sort of the topic that a lot of people are focused on. The president has a proposal for a clean energy standard. Congresswoman does. That's ours. In the Clean Energy Innovation Deployment Act. Frank Pallone of New Jersey, who is the chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, has a very broad Clean Future Act, one component of which is a clean energy standard. And then there's a bipartisan clean energy standard that's included in a Clean Energy Future Through Innovation Act, introduced by Congressman Dave McKinley, a Republican from West Virginia, and Kurt Schrader, a Democrat from Oregon. And that's actually the one bipartisan one at this point. We're hoping that ours will be bipartisan as we go forward, but so far Mr. McKinley's is the one that is bipartisan. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time, the rest of my opening statement talking about Congresswoman DeGette's bill. I'm happy to talk about the others if that's of interest here in questions and answers to the extent that I can. So it's the Congresswoman's bill is five-title bill intended again to resolve that conundrum. The first title is about energy innovation. How do we don't have the technologies, as we say in that third point, we don't have the technologies to provide affordable, reliable electricity without emissions. My understanding is that we can get there we can get to about 80% of the technologies that we have now, and that means nuclear and then wind and solar. But wind and solar are obviously intermittent resources. Nuclear doesn't ramp very well, and we have we have to deal with the intermittency. We have to deal with the daily and seasonal peaking of our electricity needs, and those three don't really do that very well. And so how do we deal, especially with that last 20%, and then plus getting up even to deployment of that full 80% would be that's no trivial issue either. And so there are a bunch of other promising clean energy technologies, various approaches to carbon capture, utilization, and storage, various types of nuclear, various energy storage, which could be very important in unlocking the full power of some of these intermittent resources. And so the first title of this bill is intended to advance the basically help a bunch of critical clean energy technologies get across their respective valleys of death, which is probably a term that you're familiar with when you go from it sort of works to being commercially available. That's what we do in the first title. The second title is our clean energy standard. We call it a zero emission electricity standard, to be as specific about it as we can. And I will come back to that in a second. The third title is a non-mandatory title. It provides incentives for achieving 100% zero emission electricity before we would expect to do that with the clean energy standard. The fourth title is low income ratepayer protection, and just to say a word about that, there are two measures there. One is to reauthorize the low income home energy assistance program, LIHEAP, and then to double the authorization of the weatherization assistance program. Both of these are intended to help lower income people pay for their energy bills and improve the efficiency of their homes. And then the fifth title is intended to address through lots of different measures what happens when energy veterans and their communities are facing a transition, and how do we give people who've made it possible to grow and build our economy? How do we support them if their situation changes and help them get to the next successful thing? But I'm going to spend most of my time again focusing on this zero emission electricity standard. Again, happy to talk about the rest of these in questions and answers. Next question, please. Next slide, please. So under as Kip was saying, under our zero emission electricity standard, generators are issued zero emission electricity credits, and I'll define that in a second. Retail electricity suppliers are required to submit the credits, and sometimes, some companies we have the generator and the retail electricity supplier integrated into one company, so you'd expect that these credits would flow to this retail electricity supplier. But as you know, there's quite a diversity of electricity markets across the country, under this bill, a retail electricity supplier could buy their credit from anywhere in the country. If you're a retail electricity supplier in Wyoming and you want to buy credit from Hawaii, you could do that. It's basically to make the market as broad as possible and to allow the retail electricity suppliers to satisfy the standard as inexpensively as possible by shopping for the credit, wherever's inexpensive. The way this thing works, that every retail electricity supplier starts in year 2023 and 24, which are the first 2 years of the program, at the current level of zero emission electricity. And specifically what that means is the level that we're at in 2017, 2018, and 2019, the average of those years. You started that in 2023 and 2024, and then we start ramping up to 100%, between 2035, getting to 100% between 2035 and 2050, depending on the availability of technology. And I'll come back to that in a sec. Next slide, please. So a critical question with all these is, what are we counting as zero emission electricity? So our bill is technology neutral. We are interested in what generates a megawatt hour with no or low greenhouse gas emissions. And so under our bill, every megawatt hour from wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, regardless of the size or the vintage, and nuclear is issued a whole zero emission electricity credit. And I'll tell you, that is controversial in some corners, as you know. Under our bill also, coal and natural gas are, and I suppose oil as well, there's still some oil generation in this country, but you're focusing mainly on coal and natural gas, are eligible for at least a partial credit based on two factors. The first factor is the direct carbon emissions to the extent that they're lower than a modern efficient coal plant. And for those of you who are familiar with these things, a modern efficient coal plant, at least the number that we're given is that the carbon intensity is 0.82 metric tons of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. So to the extent that you're lower than that, in our bill, you get get credit. Natural gas tends to generate about half that, about 0.4 metric tons of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. So for that part of the credit, a natural gas generator would get about half credit. And if you're doing CCS, if you're doing CCUS, and you're doing 100%, somehow you could get up to 100% for that part of the credit. Now we also look at the upstream methane waste because as I'm sure you all know, methane, very powerful greenhouse gas. If we're not controlling the upstream methane waste, we could be erasing any benefit from, whether it's even CCUS or moving from coal to gas, we could be erasing any benefit of that. The good news there is that the technologies for remote detection and quantification of methane waste and therefore our ability to mitigate methane waste is really moving forward very quickly. And so under this bill, we the default is that EPA does an assessment of the methane waste associated with coal, with natural gas, I guess even conceivably with oil. And if you are a generator that can demonstrate that you're beating the national average, then you show that to EPA and you get credit for that. So technology, we're trying to be completely technology neutral. Next slide, please. So under this bill, we say that we have three speeds of clean energy deployment, and they're based on the pace of innovation as indicated by the zero emission electricity price. And I said earlier, just as a quick refresher, as I said earlier, your retail electricity supplier, you can buy your credits from any generator in the country. So there's a pretty vast market around the country of sellers of credits and buyers of credits. The market price of those credits will be actually a pretty good indicator of the availability of technology. And so we use that in this bill to set up an automatic mechanism to sort of advance or slow down the required pace of deployment. In the event that technology is not keeping pace, so the default standard under this bill is that you would start, as I was saying, at the current level, your current level of zero emitting electricity at 2023 and 24, and then under the default, you take even steps until you get to 100% by 2050. But we have a mechanism, and can I see the next slide, please? Let me go to that next slide. Okay, so we have a mechanism that if we, as we approach 2050, as I said, we have the technology to take us to 80% now. If we get to say 2040, 2045, and we're still at 80%, or maybe 90 or 95%, at some point, if that relentless pace of increase outruns the ability of innovation of technology to keep up, then the prices of those credits is going to spike. And under our bill, when prices go high, we have a safety valve, and the safety valve mechanism, we call it an alternative compliance payment. It's written right in the bill what the level is. Retail electricity suppliers are allowed to pay an alternative compliance payment. The funds from the alternative compliance payment are then used to pay for out-of-system offsets, whether that's building or vehicle electrification, forest carbon stock, agricultural soil carbon, basically other ways of mitigating carbon. Because in a year when the prices spike like that within the electricity generation system, the marginal cost of carbon abatement will be actually very high, especially compared to the marginal cost of carbon abatement in these offsets. When we're in that offset when we're using offsets, we're basically going to be beating our carbon budget because we can for the same amount of money that we're getting through alternative compliance payment, we're actually getting much more carbon mitigation for the buck. So a lot of folks talk about, I'm sure you all have heard about this notion of net zero by 2050. I believe your governor has even talked about that. We've actually created a net zero mechanism in this bill that's with this alternative compliance payment and the offset mechanism. And again, it's fully automatic. Let me also just say a word about the alternative compliance payment. The way we set the alternative compliance payment is that it is intended to replicate the cost of an 80% clean energy standard. So recognizing that we know how to get to 80% now, we wanted to come up with something where we could go to the industry and say, this will not cost more than you all think you can do now. The alternative compliance payment is intended to be just above the what an 80% clean energy standard would cost. And yet provide for net zero by 2050 should the technologies not get there within the system by that time. Next slide, please. So then I'm sorry, if we go back one more, there you go, perfect, thank you. So the second speed is what happens if technology goes a lot faster. Kip was saying earlier, Wyoming has a real history of energy innovation. And in fact, there's a real history generally with industry in this country of finding better, more efficient, less expensive ways of doing whatever we need to do, including complying with various environmental regulations. The classic of this is with the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. The actual cost of complying with that law was 1/3 the projected cost. I think it's largely because people ended up buying Powder River Basin coal, which had a much lower sulfur content, which people hadn't really figured out to do. What happens if in this mechanism we find that technology is greatly outstripping that required increase? So under this bill, if technology innovation allows us to if technology innovation in fact goes fast, the credit prices will fall. And under this bill, we have a mechanism for speeding up deployment. Now, you might say, why the heck, if the prices are falling, do we want to speed it up? And a couple of reasons. One goes to climate science, but the other one goes, I think, to the pragmatics of policy. As I said before, climate science says that we really need to get moving on this. We're seeing changes across the country and across the world now, and we should go a lot faster than in reducing our emissions and getting greenhouse gas out of the atmosphere than we are. And if we can do so inexpensively, and this bill says if we can go fast inexpensively, let's do that. That's the science part of it. Now, the pragmatic part of it also is that we have a lot of experience with market-based mechanisms, around the world and even in the United States. And there have been several cases where, in fact, the price of credits tanked because the prices of allowances actually under cap and trade programs tanked for various reasons. And what happened when allowance prices, when the market was not driving innovation, when the market was not driving technology, policymakers did not respond by fixing the market mechanism. They responded by layering on a bunch of, in my view, redundant, command and control mechanisms. That I think would be not a good outcome. And so what we have in this bill is something that says, if it's inexpensive to go fast, let's go fast. So the way this works, if credit prices are low 3 years or in a row or more, we advance the date by which we get to 100%. And if you like, I can detail how that works in the bill. It's all spelled out specifically in the bill. If the credit prices are low year after year from 2023, so if they're low, I think six years in a row from 2023, we advance the date of 100% zero emission electricity to 2035. Now, that's 2035 is a very significant number in DC these days. President Biden has pledged, he pledged this as a candidate and has reiterated as president. He has pledged to get to 100% zero emitting electricity by 2035. What we're essentially saying with this bill is, Mr. President, we respect that aspiration. It's an important aspiration. We're not confident that we have the technology we know we don't have the technology to do that today. Technology innovation is inherently unpredictable. We're not 100% confident that we would achieve that by 2035. So what we're doing here is we have this mechanism that allows the pace of deployment to match the technological reality. So let's go to the next slide, please. So then we have a third speed, which is not in the clean energy standard mechanism. This third speed is the third title of the bill, which is more an incentive mechanism. And under this third speed, any generator that is prepared to replace all of its carbon emitting units with zero emission units before 2035 would get either a tax credit in the form of direct pay or a grant to help pay the cost. Not full payment of the cost. It would be partial payment, starting at 50% and then declining as the years pass, to give an incentive to go sooner, because sooner is better when you're talking about climate change. The notion here is that to us, Congresswoman DeGette sees climate change as an emergency, and it's something we need to deal with in a pragmatic way that respects technology, but something we need to deal with as fast as we can. If it's an emergency, the federal government should be willing to spend money to make it possible for us to deal with this, and that's what that third speed does. Can we go to the next slide, please? So now let me recap a couple of things. I know CCUS and nuclear are very important to Wyoming. So I wanted to put together a Wyoming slide here and just recap the approach to those two bills. And I know wind and solar are important as well, but these two I know are sort of uniquely important. First is that I mentioned that we have a first title of this bill that is the innovation title. One of the things that we have in the innovation title is we have a tax credit for a technology neutral tax credit there, and then we also have this technology neutral tax credit that in the third title. I can explain these more, how they fit together better in the question answer, but basically you can get a tax credit for installation of nuclear and CCUS that replaces emitting generation. You get one zero emission electricity credit for every megawatt hour of nuclear generation. We're treating nuclear like solar or wind. You can get at least partial credit for fossil fuel generation with CCUS as long as we're limiting the upstream methane waste. I don't know if we have the technology to do this today, but if we came up with the technology to fully eliminate the carbon emissions, the carbon exhaust, I should say, from the generating unit, and we were able to fully eliminate the upstream methane waste, you could get a full credit. And so, for example, the Pacific Core Reactor Demonstration Project that I know you all have been there's been much news about that in Wyoming, would be eligible for the tax credit and get a full zero emission electricity credit under the clean energy standard. Dry Fork, and then some of you will be familiar with Project Tundra in North Dakota and Prairie State in Illinois, and other coal generation with CCUS would be eligible for the tax credit and eligible for at least partial zero emission electricity credit. And let's see the next slide, which I think is my last major slide. So just to summarize, the DeGette Clean Energy Innovation Deployment Act deploys affordable, reliable, zero emission electricity as soon as is technologically feasible. And I sort of went through that, but that's very critical to us If we can go fast, we go fast. If we can go fast while retaining affordable, reliable electricity, we go fast. If not, we take the time we need. And if we can't even do it by 2050, we figure out a way to do it from the offsets. It protects low-income ratepayers. It assists workers in transition, workers in their communities in transition. And I didn't talk too much about this, but there's a big and growing international market for clean energy technology. China is actually beating us in that market now, and part of our intent is to make the United States one of the global leaders in this. When we talk about CCUS in particular, a lot of folks building coal plants out there, including China. We're going to need to retrofit a whole lot of coal plants, and I think the United States is more likely than most to be the place where that happens. So we can go to the next slide. I think that's my ending slide. So that's my email address. I would ask anybody who wants to learn. We'll do some. We have another half hour now. I know Jada's going next, but then we'll have some questions and answers. And if you have questions after that, and you want to, set up a time to talk, I'd be delighted to talk to you about this bill. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to Jada's presentation and the question and answers after that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roy. So Jada, I think you're up.
Thank you, Kip, and thank you for the gracious introduction. And thank you, Nikki. It's been a pleasure and an honor to participate in this discussion today. So, Christine, next slide, please. I am going to talk to everyone about how a clean electricity standard would impact Wyoming. And the two factors under that, the applicability, have to do with how the clean electricity standard defines clean, and then what entities does the clean electricity standard apply to. Next, I'll discuss how a clean electricity standard will interact with Wyoming state law. And then finally, I'll discuss how a clean electricity standard will apply in a traditionally regulated market as opposed to a competitive market. Next slide, please. Thank you. So typically, clean electricity standards apply to utilities and generators. And true to form, I'm going to refer to Representative DeGette's bill as the CEIDA. It's just its acronym. So true to form, the CEIDA would apply to retail electricity suppliers, and those are utility companies or generators, and entities selling electricity to end-use customers. And retail electricity suppliers are defined in the bill as entities in the United States selling not fewer than 20 megawatt hours of electric energy to electric consumers for purposes other than resale during the preceding calendar year. So under the CES that Dr. Roy has discussed, Wyoming might see more utilities interested in diversifying their generation assets. That could look like CCUS, wind, solar, small nuclear, with the cutoff being 20 megawatt hours of retail sales in the previous year. Interestingly, the CEIDA applies to all retail suppliers of electricity. So that's co-ops, municipalities, and investor-owned utilities, regardless of ownership, as long as they generate 20 megawatt hours per year or more, as opposed to Wyoming's House Bill 200, which is Wyoming Statute 37-18-101 through 102. That is Wyoming's electricity portfolio standard, which is only applicable to investor-owned utilities. Next slide, please. So inclusive clean electricity standards garner more bipartisan support due to the flexibility they offer utilities in including a variety of generation assets. For example, the CEIDA's clean definition casts a wide net, as we've heard from Dr. Roy. It awards full credit to zero emission technologies, including nuclear, and partial credit to fossil-based generation that consider their carbon emissions and also the upstream methane wastes. In Wyoming, and according to the IEA, CCUS, we know, will need to hold a significant role in the energy transition because it aligns the at times divergent goals of, one, meeting the global energy demand as a reliable generation source, and two, addressing climate mitigation by reducing emissions and removing carbon dioxide. So regardless of state policies, a federal standard that's inclusive as opposed to exclusive of CCUS and nuclear does ensure that CCUS has a seat at the table. Next slide, please. So this is a list of recent legislative actions by the state of Wyoming that demonstrates Wyoming's dedication and innovation for commercial deployment of CCUS, small nuclear, and other technologies necessary to the energy transition. For instance, rare earth elements and critical mineral mining for battery storage. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but among other things, this legislation has set out pore space ownership, mechanisms for monitoring, reporting, and verification of geologic sequestration sites, the interaction between production and storage rights, policy encouragements for sourcing rare earth elements and critical minerals for battery development, and then Wyoming's electricity portfolio standard, which is currently in process. The Public Service Commission is engaged in a rulemaking. So specifics of this standard are not yet known, but the statute does lay out definitions for dispatchable, reliable, low carbon, and CCUS technology. The next slide discusses recent utility actions. So even utilities in Wyoming and the federal government and the university have been dedicated to pursuing low and zero carbon technology development. So we've already discussed briefly, Basin Electric, the School of Energy Resources, and other partners are currently in process retrofitting the Dry Fork Station, which is located in the Powder River Basin, with CCUS as part of the DOE's Carbon Storage Assurance Facility Enterprise Initiative, which is Carbon Safe. And as Dr. Roy described, this project would be eligible for tax credit for installation of CCUS, and then as long as upstream methane emissions were limited, a partial credit. Same with the small nuclear reactor that was just announced on June 2nd by Governor Gordon. This is a project with TerraPower and PacifiCorp, where a small modular nuclear reactor, it's I think a natrium technology, is a demonstration project intended to be installed at a retiring coal plant under Wyoming Statute 3511-2100. Again, this would be eligible for a tax credit and under Representative DeGette's bill. Next slide, please. So how would a clean electricity standard interact with Wyoming state law, particularly the CEIDA? So one method for a CES is to coexist with state programs. There are various ways that this can occur. For instance, the CES may set the floor or a base level and allow states to set more stringent requirements. Another method is preemption. The CES can preempt state programs. The danger of preemption is that the federal policy might not align with state goals, and it reduces state autonomy. And the benefit of preemption is that it does avoid a patchwork of state programs. The CEIDA is an example of coexistence. Under Section 206, existing states, CESs or clean electricity standards, are not preempted. That section states that nothing in this title affects the authority of a state or a political subdivision of a state to adopt or enforce any law or regulation relating to clean energy or renewable energy, the regulation of retail electricity supplier, or greenhouse gas emission reductions. So states are also prevented from absolving themselves from this federal CES requirement, and the administrator is required of the federal bill would be required to consult with states that do have a clean energy program in order to facilitate practical coordination of the programs and establish the state as a what's called qualified state. The idea would be that the state standard would take the place of the federal standard, the thought being that the state's plan would go above and beyond the floor that the federal CES had set. Section 206C, it specifies how to count credits from qualified and not qualified states. And when I turn it back to Nikki, I'm hopeful he can answer a question or maybe give a real world example of how credits would be counted in a qualified state versus a non-qualified state, and how a utility would be impacted by these differences depending on the type of generation used. I do have a few more slides and then I'll turn it to you, Nikki. So applicability to Wyoming. Under this bill, in Wyoming, the state of Wyoming would consult with the administrator of the program. That would ensure that coordination of the CEIDA and its electricity portfolio standard, that the CEIDA and Wyoming's electricity portfolio standards still being developed, that's House Bill 200, were coordinated. And interesting, again, they have different applicability. So the clean electricity standard at the federal level applies to all retail sellers of electricity with the cutoff of 20 megawatt hours per year. Whereas Wyoming's electricity portfolio standard is focused more on carbon capture, and it only applies to investor-owned utilities. If Wyoming were to develop a more broad-based clean electricity standard, consultation would be required with the administrator of the federal plan to make sure that Wyoming was able to become a qualified state under the bill. Finally, in my last slide, I will talk about how a clean electricity standard would apply in a traditionally regulated retail market as compared to a competitive retail market. So the impact of a clean electricity standard does differ. Dr. Roy got into this a little bit, but I'll go into a slight bit more detail. It depends on the electricity market regulatory structure. So in regulated retail markets, they consist of vertically integrated electric utilities that own their generation, their distribution, and their transmission. And they sell the electricity that they generate to their customers. In a competitive electricity market, they have unbundled. So they no longer are vertically integrated, and the electric utility has to buy power from competitive generators in the market and sell it to retail customers. Wyoming is not in a competitive market. It has not restructured, so it has the traditional regulated retail market, and it has vertically integrated utilities. That means that the utility will accrue credits for its generation outputted from its qualified energy facilities. Each utility can opt to purchase credits from other entities, or it could choose to sell excess credits to entities. It will most likely use the least cost method to guide its actions in the market. So it will choose when to invest in new clean energy generation assets and when to increase utilization of those clean energy facilities, depending on when it's cost effective. It will use this method to determine when to rely on purchasing and when selling is more cost effective as well for the energy credits. The State Public Service Commission will regulate the ability of that utility to pass the costs and the revenues associated with investing in those technologies and purchasing and selling credits on to its customers. In contrast, in a competitive market, the utility does not own its generation, so it must purchase tradable credits from the market, as Dr. Roy has discussed. So that ends my discussion, and I will turn it back to Nikki. Nikki, I can remind you of my question if you'd like, or you can discuss whatever suits you.
Well, terrific presentation, Jada. Thank you so much. Really, it's great to be on this platform with you. Let me state what we're going for with the state issue, because I think that's really what your question went to. It's exactly as you say. We're trying, recognizing that different states have different objectives with their state policy. Environmental policy and energy development policy. You just have different objectives. We're trying to interfere with that as little as possible. And if there's you were saying there's a trade-off between preemption, because there's a risk that you might have more of a patchwork, and on the other side there's a risk that you'd be preempting state objectives. We're erring very clearly in favor of the patchwork. We're okay with the patchwork. You all, Wyoming has a very different set of objectives for the way you do your energy than Hawaii or California or Florida, and that's great. And we've set up our federal system is specifically designed to do that. So the aspiration under this bill is that we create sort of two classes of state. Those that are not, those who have not set up a more stringent program than is set up under this bill. And if you have a program that's not more stringent than that's under this bill, then I think the bill has virtually no effect whatsoever on the state program. And in particular, a unit of credit, a megawatt hour that's generated from a zero emitting resource, whether it's wind or solar or nuclear or coal with CCUS, would get a credit from both under the state system and under the federal system, right? So one unit of electricity from zero emission would get credits under both systems, complete non-interference. The second class of state is a state that has set up a more stringent standard somehow. And I think California is the only one that right now that we know of that might be in that situation. In that situation, we're saying, okay, if you're actually you actually set up programs, however those programs are defined, that gets more zero emitting electricity out of your electricity system than a company that's in compliance with your state's laws is in compliance with the federal law. We're not going to stack anything on top of it or on top of you or require you to do anything more for the federal that you're doing for the state. You're set. So again, in both situations, we're not trying to interfere. But what we do anticipate is that if we establish a program like this, a lot of states have gotten into the business of state climate policy out of frustration that they weren't seeing the leadership from the federal government, and we think that we believe that if we set up a federal program like the kind I just described, then those states that are doing it primarily to deal with climate change can say, okay, that problem is maybe sort of solved. Maybe we can work on other climate problems, whether they're transportation or buildings or what have you, and states that have an interest in innovation in a particular technology, like Wyoming with coal, Wyoming with nuclear, like some states with solar, some states with wind, might direct their energy policy to that in particular.
All right, so Dr. Roy, does that conclude your final remarks?
In response to that, let's see, we got 15 more minutes of your.
So I've got so first of all, so we do have some questions that have come in. So if first of all, I'd like to begin by first of all thanking Christine Reed, who organizes all these webinars and does such a fantastic job. She's the unsung hero here. I also want to thank you, Dr. Roy, and you, Ms. Jada Garofalo, for that really interesting exchange. We do have a couple questions that have come in, and if you could both just stay on, and I will do my best to read them verbatim. So the first question is quite long, and I'm just going to read it here. It says, "It looks like the best free market driver that can be put in place in order to reward zero emission energy is the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act, such as House HR 2307, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. It would reward clean energy companies and drive investment towards zero emissions technology, while also providing monthly dividends to all low-income people. And most people in general are shown to benefit or at least break even on any increases in fuel prices. Wouldn't it be in Wyoming's interest if our governor and our congressional representatives signed on and supported Carbon Fee and Dividend in order to help families undergoing energy transition in the workforce and drive money to investments in mitigating carbon?" So, Dr. Roy, I may kick that to you. So how does your bill from the 10,000 foot level differ from a carbon tax and dividend approach, sure, if I'm paraphrasing that right, something like that?
Well, let me start off. Let me start off by saying I think you could absolutely structure a carbon fee and dividend that would be great, and every bit as good and probably better than what I'm talking about. But there are a couple of, I think a couple of advantages that Clean Energy Standard has. So some of them are sort of policy advantages, and some of them are political advantages. One is that so with a carbon fee and dividend, one risk is that unless you really differentiate the dividend, the way you give out the dividend by region, there's a risk that in carbon intensive parts of the country where the electricity is more carbon intensive, there would be more of a fee paid and more increase in electricity. And if the dividend is given uniformly across the country, the effect would be to be transferring funds from the carbon intensive part of the country to the carbon less intensive part of the country. That can be fixed, right? You could fix that by differentiating the way you give out the dividends to respect the carbon intensity. So that's a concern right there. Another so I've talked a whole lot to investor-owned utilities, to the Edison Electric Institute, which is a trade association of investor-owned utilities, to your rural electric co-ops, especially Tri-State, which is a big, obviously a big in Wyoming, it's big in Colorado as well, and to public power agencies, and the reason a lot of them appreciate a clean energy standard is that no money goes to the government, except in the case where you're paying that alternative compliance payment. No money goes to the government. You're not paying a fee that goes to the government. All the money goes from one company to another company, and because of that, the cost is actually less. And a way to think of that is that if you're a power company, and you're subject to a clean energy standard, as long as you're keeping your clean energy deployment above that required level, you're not paying anything extra under a carbon tax, or even under a cap and trade, unless there's free allowance allocation. No matter how fast you're increasing clean energy, you are paying for every ton of carbon you put up in the atmosphere. And the result is that clean energy standards end up being a lot less expensive than a carbon tax or allowance allocation, or cap and trade without free allowance allocation. Now, that's not to say that you can fix those problems. You can fix those problems in either a carbon tax or a cap and trade. So I don't want to trash either one of those. I think they're legitimate approaches. But let's talk about the politics a little bit. The politics are such that I think it would just be very, very hard to pass anything that was a carbon tax right now, even if there was some feeling that we would give back the money as a dividend. It's just there's a very significant part of the country that feels that government's too big already, and we shouldn't be paying more money to do that. And that's a very strong tide that you fight whenever you raise the idea of a carbon fee. Clean energy standard, that money does not go to the government. We don't have that burden.
Thank you very much. Okay, next question for the panel. So who would administer this approach? So who would administer this program, the tax credits, the standard? How was it funded? I mean, presumably this is going to cost the government something, but I mean, is this run by EPA? Is it run by FERC? Is it run by the IRS? Who would be running this?
Under our bill, different agencies run different parts. So the innovation part is run by the Department of Energy. Weatherization assistance program, that kind of thing. The workforce transition department of Energy. And then the tax credit parts, obviously the IRS, right? But then for the clean energy standard, for the zero emission electricity standard, we have that run by EPA. In the version of the bill that was introduced last year, we had that run by Department of Energy, but we had both power companies and environmental groups coming to us and saying, look, DOE, it's a great agency, but they're not really a compliance agency. And if people are going to be paying for these credits, they're going to want to know that it's real. And so you want a compliance agency being able to make sure that they can be backed up. And so I was hearing that from both sides, and it rang accurate to me. So for the zero emitting electricity standard, we're having that run by EPA.
Very good, thank you. Next question. Okay, are there any utilities or energy companies that are endorsing or simply speaking in favor of the Clean Energy Innovation and Deployment Act?
So Xcel has endorsed it. If you go to our website, if you go to Congresswoman DeGette's website, which is DeGette.house.gov, and you go to issues and you go to climate, and actually maybe we can figure out a way to send this to folks. You'll see the there's a what they're saying page that talks about where different entities made comments upon the introduction of our bill. And so you'll see lots of, Xcel endorsed it, Edison Electric Institute, Southern Company, American Electric Power, Duke Energy, a group called the Clean Energy Group. and then a bunch of environmental groups and a couple of labor unions. Not all of them endorsed it, but they all had very positive, constructive things to say, basically saying this is a useful effort. We want to stay engaged to improve it. And you all read the newspapers. You know how tough it is in Washington these days to find common ground. I took that as a sign that we're hovering over common ground. I was told by, I've been told more recently that by folks in the power sector, that of the approaches, of the different approaches that the different options that people see ahead of them, they prefer our approach. And I want to touch on one, Kip, with your indulgence. You were talking about how there is an Obama clean power plan and a Trump ACEs, and who knows what Biden's going to come up with. Well, that uncertainty doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the industry, doesn't help the industry's customers, doesn't help the environment. And so a lot of power companies are telling us that rather than seeing that back and forth, pendulum, they'd rather just come up with, let's just come up with a law. It's not going to be the way we would have written it, but it's going to be good enough. We can live with it, and it gives a predictable structure. Let's do that. And so that we're trying to come up with something that covers, that hits a common ground, and it feels like we're pretty close.
All right, so we only have 4 more minutes, so I'm going to take moderator or MC, whatever I am, Sergeant at Arms. I'm going to declare Sergeant at Arms privilege and toss out a couple of questions here. And the first one, I want to follow up on what you just said, Dr. Roy. So if a clean electricity standard were to be enacted, would it necessarily displace the Clean Air Act counterpart? So there would be no Section 111D program out of the Biden administration if an approach like this. So a utility would not face both Clean Air Act controls and a clean electricity standard. It would be the clean electricity standard, and the Clean Air Act would recede to that extent. Is that an accurate description?
So I should say that there's nothing that specifically talks about the Clean Air Act in our bill as it is now. In the McKinley-Schrader bill that I mentioned, they do specifically turn off the Clean Air Act for certain, under certain conditions. And whether that could be done, that's really one of the very complicated issues that would have to be wrestled with if we got a bipartisan partnership on this bill. Obviously, there are folks that feel very strongly that shouldn't be done. But if nothing else, the Biden administration is under intense pressure to implement a new clean power plan under the Clean Air Act, Section 111. Enactment of a law like this would greatly take off that pressure. They would not have to. They could do maybe an inside the fence line thing if they had to do it. Right now, they're being, for those of you who know what I'm talking about with inside the fence, outside the fence, best system of emission reduction, the pressure to get as adventurous as they're otherwise going to have to be would be taken way off if a law like the type I described was enacted.
Very good. So Christine, I think you're going to, this is wrapping up our program. I think Christine, you're going to bring up a slide for the upcoming webinar. And so that brings us to the end of the hour. And so I would like to thank, first of all, SER, Christine Reed, thank you so very much. We will be having an upcoming webinar with more details coming soon. That's going to be, well, it'll be on July 29th. And it's going to be on hydrogen energy in Wyoming. And you see the speakers indicated there. So you can check our website for more details about that program. Again, I would like to thank Christine Reed again. I'd like to thank SER. I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Roy, J. Garofalo. I thought this was a very interesting debate and discussion, and that concludes our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Kip. Bye.